All right, I think we are good to go. Welcome again to everybody for making the time today to join us for this webinar. My name is John Van Zuylen and I will be your host today. I would like to thank you, of course, for your time, and I would like to thank our distinguished speakers for making the time as well to share some of their expertise with us today. We have a very interesting webinar on a very specific topic where solar energy can make a real difference for airports, specifically in Africa. Before we go to the webinar and listen to our speakers today, I would like to give you a quick introduction about AFSIA. For those of you who may not necessarily be familiar with the association. AFSIA is the Africa Solar Industry Association. Our goal is really to be the go-to platform for everything solar in Africa, and that means promote everything about solar solutions across Africa, share information and knowledge about solar in Africa, and of course also help our members to increase their reach and generate more business. We are based in Kigali, Rwanda, but we are very lucky to count on a team on very good professionals and experienced professionals all across Africa. And we organize different activities in many different countries. So we really cover the entire continent, sub-Saharan Africa, but also the Northern African region. The topics that we cover are also everything about solar. So it goes from large-scale projects all the way down to solar home system, mini-grid, CNI, solar irrigation, solar cooking, really everything you can think of, and also across all different topics from a pure technical angle, legal, financial. Everything that touches on solar is home to AFSIA. In terms of activities, we have various sets of activities, newsletters, webinars like today, databases, research on the industry, and of course also business support and lead generation for our members. You can get a quick glimpse of the existing members right now. We have different categories, all very good experts in the industry. We're very lucky to count them among our members. And the group keeps on growing, and of course we would be happy to count you among our members very soon. This gives you, I won't go over all details, but this gives you an overview of the next few months and of all the activities that we will be organizing. We have the webinar about solar airports today. Next month we will have another webinar about solar innovation for agriculture, and then other activities, AFSIA Solar Awards, annual outlook report, and participation in various events across the globe. Today, we will be talking about solar energy for African airports. I would like to thank also our media partners, Afric21 and Insight, for spreading the news about this webinar. And also, of course, I would like to thank our speakers, again for sharing their expertise with us. Today we have a busy schedule, and I would like to immediately get started with our first speaker, Stephen Barrett, who is principal at Barrett Energy Resources. Steve is one of the foremost global experts on solar for airports. He has consulted for the United Nations ICAO, International Civil Association organizations for several years. And in his work, he has been focusing on identifying the benefits of solar for airports across the globe, as well as leading project management on several landmark projects in Africa and also around the globe. So I will very quickly share the words to Steve. And before doing so, I would like to submit a very quick poll to you and ask you how many airports of all types, the big ones, the medium ones, the small ones, you think there actually are in Africa? So this is not a trick question. It's there is a clear number, but I would like to test your knowledge about this and get a feel of whether or not you actually know how many airports there are across Africa. I'll just give you a few more seconds to answer this question, and it seems we have a very diverging opinion on the topic. Just a few more seconds, just 5 more, and I will soon share the results. There we see that a majority of listeners think that there is around 2,000 airports, but still we have also a very large number who think we have more, 5,000, 15%, or even less than this. Very interesting. So we see that there's a very diverging opinion on the number of airports. The correct answer is 2,100. So this highlights the amazing opportunity there is for this topic today. The number of airports that can potentially benefit from solar in Africa is really huge. And without further ado, I will now give the word to Steve to give us an overview of the situation of solar at airports in the globe and in Africa specifically. Steve, I'm sharing the controls to you now.
Okay, thank you, John. I want to make sure everyone can see my screen.
Yes, you can go on presentation mode maybe, and that will be good.
Great. Well, thank you very much, John. My name is Steve Barrett. I'm based in the USA, Boston area. I have had the pleasure to work with a couple of our panelists on projects in Africa through ICAO, the UN's International Civil Aviation Organization. And so it's a pleasure to be with them here and also to meet John and Terje. So this is a really important topic for me. I've been working in the area of renewable energy in airports for about 10 years, much of that work in the US. And it is a really interesting fit that people don't maybe automatically recognize. And there are a number of reasons for that. And the great thing here, I'm here in Boston, but we have folks in Africa, and obviously there's a focus for this lesson, this webinar on Africa, but these are things that can be applied to airports and solar all over the world. So it's really terrific to have people participating in our webinar from all different places, evening, afternoon, I'm in the morning. So, straight to the topic, these are kind of the characteristics of airports that make them very suitable for solar. Not all airports are big. There are many big airports, but there's infrastructure associated with most airports, and that makes solar at airports cost effective, because when you need to build new electrical infrastructure to connect the solar, then that makes the solar project more expensive. So that's really a key piece of it. And so airports are hubs. Even in more rural areas, they are locations that concentrate people. And so it makes it very suitable for developing all sorts of types of projects, being a focus for project development, and solar fits very well with that. A couple of other points, airports oftentimes have a lot of extra land because they can be noisy, so they buffer from communities, and some of that land can be very cost effective for doing projects. Similarly, solar is very low profile, so when you're building tall structures near airports, that can be a hazard. But solar is very low to the ground, so that makes it very effective in siting. And then kind of similar to my comments about airports being hubs for activity, there's a lot of public benefit and government involvement in airports, and that can be a way to implement public policy and to demonstrate environmental benefits to the public. So back to the point where solar is very modular, it's low profile, there are a number of different types of configurations that may be sited on airports given the conditions of the airport. So if an airport has a lot of extra land, then you'll see ground-mounted solar projects, which you see on the screen here on the left. The ground-mounted projects are best fit for larger projects, and you have economies of scale, you produce a lot of electricity. So that is one type, but airports also have a lot of built infrastructure, and solar fits very well with conforming and fitting into the built infrastructure. So car parks, we say in the US parking lots, you can build canopy structures over the parking areas, and that provides not only solar electricity, but also shaded parking, which can be a benefit, particularly in hotter, sunnier parts of the world. And then also where there are airport buildings, you can site the solar on top of the buildings. That space is not being used for other things, so it's a win-win as far as producing electricity from parts of the airport that might not otherwise be used. One really important component of looking at solar projects at airports is to make sure that the solar facility does not produce adverse glare impacts. Even though solar photovoltaic is designed to capture as much light as possible, and any reflection that comes off the solar panels is a waste, it's lost electricity production potential, it's very difficult to eliminate all glare because solar panels are shiny surfaces. And so you do get some glare. So in the airport context, you'll want to look at the air traffic control tower and also at flights arriving, the final flight path. And here in the US, the Federal Aviation Administration produced a modeling tool which helps airports and solar developers make sure that their projects will not cause negative glare impacts. And the development of this tool has been very successful in answering the question, will there be glare? You run the modeling tool for your design and your location, and you can very easily solve that question. So if anyone has any questions about that, we do a lot of that work here in the US. Finally, a couple of slides on the progress of airport solar projects. These next two slides are recent data from a report that I just produced for the FAA here in the US. It's about airport projects in the US. But you can see that the number of projects continues to increase. Actually, this is the installed capacity, kilowatts. And so what you see is back 10 years ago, a lot of smaller projects were being built, integrated into buildings for on-site use. But now you see over time much larger projects being built and the economics improving and cost of electricity decreasing. So this next slide really just shows how the design of projects, so you have the blue bar as canopy projects, orange ground mounted projects, and gray is roof. So you had more roof and smaller projects kind of in the early days, and now you're seeing more ground mounted projects taking advantage of that underutilized land at airports to produce bigger projects, as well as more canopy projects, which are more expensive typically to build because you're building the canopy structures, but also very very effective in providing ancillary benefits. Finally, this is just a slide. It's representative of some of the activity at solar projects at airports in Africa. A couple of the projects you'll hear from the other panelists from Douala, Cameroon, and Mombasa, Kenya. Those were projects that were installed in 2019. Very exciting demonstration projects, and you can see some other activity. I think the key point here is that these initial projects have been enabled by public policy and government funding, and have demonstrated that airports and solar are effective and successful in Africa. And so now the hope is that there's opportunity for private sector investment to continue the success. So with that, John, I think I'm passing it back to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Steve, for this excellent introduction about today's topic. And yes, thank you for giving me back the controls. We will have the pleasure of hearing back from you towards the end of this presentation for a second section that you are presenting, just before the Q&A. Talking about the Q&A, some of you have already started submitting some questions. I invite you to keep doing so. We will address as many of them as possible towards the end of this presentation. One question that always comes up very regularly, which I can already answer right now, is yes, you will receive the slides of today's presentation. Actually, you will receive the link towards a recording of today's presentation. So don't worry about it. Take some notes if you want, but if you miss something, you will get more chances later on to listen again to today's presentation. One topic that comes back systematically when talking about a solar project with a potential end user is always the technical concerns, questions that arise about technical issues. Is it dangerous? Is it not? What are the right things to do? And those concerns, those technical questions are definitely very present when we look at strategic infrastructure such as airports. And our next speaker, Peter, will specifically address some of those questions now. I'm really happy to welcome Peter. Peter, who is project management at Solarcentury. Solarcentury, for those of you who are not familiar with this company, is one of the most recognized EPC company in Africa. And we're really lucky to have Peter today, because Peter actually was the project manager of one of the few solar airports that have been built in Africa, specifically for the project built in Mombasa in Kenya. So as you can imagine, Peter brings some excellent and great hands-on experience. And without further ado, I'm delighted to invite Peter to tell us a bit more about that work and about technical concerns that may have covered during his work in Mombasa.
Great. Thank you very much, John. And thank you, Stephen, for your introduction as well. Just in way of introduction, yes, I'm Peter Sweetnam. I am a project manager for Solarcentury East Africa. And yes, I was the project manager for one of the solar projects at an airport in Africa, Mombasa Airport, just over 500 kilowatt peak ground mount, which was an exciting and challenging project, which is, oops, there goes my alarm, which is why I hopefully will be able to address some of your technical questions. John, may I ask if you could make me host, or have you already done so?
I believe you are already host, yes. So okay. You can share the screen maybe at the bottom of your screen.
Yes.
Green button at the bottom of, in the middle of your screen.
Mhm.
Peter, you need to unmute yourself. I think, yes, there we go.
Yes, I'm afraid my Zoom has hidden my bottom bar and I don't have the option to share screen. Oh, there it's back. Thank you.
Really the green
Right.
thing at the bottom of your screen, yeah. There we go.
Fantastic. Great. So addressing technical questions. The top of my list of technical questions is normally where and how do we install solar at an airport? I've written here where to install solar at an airport, but it could also be questioned as how to install solar at an airport. This is a topic that Stephen has touched on in his presentation before me, but the options, the way I see it, there are three major options. We have roof-mounted solar, we have ground-mounted, and then we have carport structures. Each of these obviously have their own technical considerations. I have summarized these into my top three considerations. For a roof mount structure, number one, we would always need to look at the roof condition. For example, Mombasa Airport, the roof was old and had terracotta tiles and had multiple pitches. So the roof condition was not favorable for a solar system. So we went for a ground mount system. The roof shape and the size is also a key factor. As I said, Mombasa Airport had multiple pitches, which in itself is not an impossible roof to install solar on. In fact, we've done multiple roofs with multiple pitches in Nairobi, and it's not an issue. But the shape and the size will determine or could possibly limit the overall system size that you could install at your particular airport or a airport. But one of the pros of a roof mount is that they are likely to be the cheapest option. By the nature of the roof mount system, you will take advantage of the inclination of the roof, and therefore you can minimize, or the amount of framework will be minimized. It'll be a minimal. So you will have less cost. For a ground mount, my top three, available land. Obviously, if there is land that is free to use and it is cost effective, as Steve has said, then this is a beneficial factor. And of course, the size of that land will also dictate how large or how small you can go. I know that from Mombasa Airport, we did not use all the land that was earmarked for our use, but we were in fact limited by the investment size from ICAO. Another key factor when considering a ground mount system is future expansion. We had looked at a number of potential sites. Some of them had been earmarked for future expansion. I know there was a hotel coming on one of our parcels of land that we had identified as potential for solar installation. So we had to shift the design and move the location. I think one of the larger benefits of a ground mount system is that you can make use of the space and to create your optimal conditions. You can tilt the solar panels to face the equator at the optimal tilt. The orientation is also a key point here. One other consideration, which I have not included here, is the cost. It's likely to be more expensive than a roof mount system because the amount of framework needed, the amount of metal is higher, so the cost goes up. Carport structures are the third that Steve mentioned and that I consider to be a viable option for an airport. This is a picture of Garden City Shopping Mall in Nairobi, which was another project we completed in Kenya. A carport structure will come at a higher cost. The materials needed are more, the structure is larger, there will be a higher cost. So this needs to be considered when weighing up the three options outlined here. A carport structure is hugely beneficial in hot countries such as we have in Africa by the production of shade for the car park users. I think this is a very good benefit and one that if an airport is considering solar, they could consider this to be a huge benefit. Again, the size of the system is likely to be restricted by the size of or the number of free parking bays that can accommodate a carport structure. So this is something that also needs to be considered carefully when selecting the mounting structure type. But there are other carport, mounting structure options, but for me, these are the three main ones. Right, getting into the details. I'll try not to get too technical here, but system.
I think we might have lost Peter, or at least Peter's noise. We'll give him a...
Hello, can you hear me?
Peter's back. Yes.
Aha, my apologies. Okay, sorry about that. Technical internet issues, I guess. So I was saying the system integration and point of connection is a very important topic to consider. Here I've got a screenshot of a very simplified diagram showing how the solar on the right can integrate into an existing electrical infrastructure of an airport or any other CNI space, really. But this is actually from the proposal we did for Mombasa Airport. You can see there the solar coming in on the right, and on the left we have various other power sources. We have the grid, which is your national electricity provider. And in Africa, we are likely to see a lot of diesel generators. I suppose most airports around the world will have diesel generator backup as well. So that's just a little diagram. The points to consider here, most CNI and most airport installations, I believe, would be behind the meter installations. And by this, we mean that the solar will be injected or connected within the client's own electrical infrastructure after it has been billed from the utility provider. In Africa, we don't really, well, in Kenya specifically, we do not benefit a lot from feed-in tariffs. So we are not permitted to allow power to go back through the utility meter onto the national grid. Therefore, we need to include some form of zero export control. This is a fancy term for just preventing any solar power or any excess generation that is not used by the airport facility from going back onto the grid. Sorry, I'm aware that my microphone is susceptible to a bit of wind and I have a breeze coming through, so my apologies if there's any interference. Zero export control is achieved normally by the inclusion of a third-party system that integrates between the solar system, the inverters, and the client's existing infrastructure, which is diesel gensets and perhaps perhaps diesel gensets and a grid connection. As I said, there are likely to be diesel generators. So one other option, I guess, is to include generator parallel operation. This, if you have or are susceptible to multiple and prolonged power failures, you are likely to see airports running for extended periods on backup generators. Now, when we talk about grid parallel or grid-tied inverter systems, they will normally switch off when there is a power failure for safety reasons. I'm not going to go into the technical side of that, but with the inclusion of a generator parallel system, generator fuel saver controller, for example, you will be allowed to or be able to power or accept the power from the solar system in parallel with the generators. For Mombasa Airport, this was something we did include, so we had all of these functions. The last and probably the most key point here is the voltage at which we will connect to the client system. We looked at multiple connection points and possible connection points within Mombasa Airport, ranging from 415 up to 11 kV. In the end, it was most feasible and made the most technical sense to connect at their main substation, which was an 11 kV substation. This meant that, or this means that the solar system will likely need a step-up transformer to step it up from the low voltage 415, which is your average three-phase commercial voltage, up to an 11 kV, which is more your distribution voltage. We then, for Mombasa Airport, we used a underground cable to then take the power from the solar site back to the connection point, and with the inclusion of all the correct medium voltage switchgear, of course. There are obviously quite a few more considerations that need to be taken into account when designing a system for an airport, but most of these will be considerations that would need to be taken into account with the design of a normal or any other commercial and industrial application. So I don't think we will go into detail with those today. Now, I guess here's the chance for me to describe the biggest challenge that I found in installing solar at an airport. I think number one for me would have been the interaction with ongoing airport activities. Here you can see a nice photograph of us ripping open the reinforced concrete apron on a live airport. This is a huge challenge, or can be. It involves the liaison between all the aviation operators, the ground handlers, the ground flight safety officers, the airport engineering, airport management, airlines. It's a significant, it involves a significant number of participants, and is crucial. Well, at least the safe operation of this is crucial. Obviously, we need to ensure that no or minimal interruption is encountered in flights and ongoing operations of the airport. And of course, safety is paramount, as it is or should be throughout any installation anywhere, but even more so, I guess, in a live environment such as in an ongoing airport. In this particular image, this is us setting up safety perimeter around where we will conduct the excavations. So it's pretty clean at the moment, but it gets pretty dirty after this. But I don't have an image to share with you today of that. Second biggest challenge for me was dealing with the airport security. Conducting a construction operation at an airport is a challenge at the best of times. And it involves dealing with airport security on multiple levels. We have all the personnel who need to work on the airport system have to go through rigorous vetting and approvals by the airport security teams before we can allow anybody to work on the site. In this instance, we had some work to do on the air side, which is the technical term for everything after airport security and check-in, in our case on the airport runway. This involves getting special passes for those operatives. Even just the movement of vehicles in and out of the airport for delivery is a challenge. So when considering an airport installation, I think a lot of planning needs to be put in, and a lot of discussion needs to be had with airport security teams to find out what requirements they have. I'm sure each airport will be similar, but will have their own unique requirements. And for me, that is that's my top technical challenges that I could address for you today.
Thank you very much, Peter. It really excited the interest of listeners, because we got many questions as you were speaking, and several of those were specifically about those last challenges that you addressed. So that's already one part of the questions answered, but very interesting to get your input, somebody who has actually already delivered such a project, so who can really talk with a lot of knowledge on this topic. I understand, as a quick conclusion, that yes, there are some technical aspects to take into account, but that everything ran in the end very smoothly, and that security issues should not necessarily be a major concern for any airport operator who would want to go the solar way. And talking about airport operators, I'm really glad to host our next speaker, Mazarin, who is Director of Security, Safety, Quality and Environment for Cameroon Airports. It so happens, you saw it in the presentation of Steve in the beginning, that Douala Airport is actually one of the largest solar airports in Africa. And the person who is in charge of this project is actually with us today to tell us a little bit more about his experience, the benefits the airport has experienced, and also a little bit, I believe, about the future plans for further expansion. Mazarin, really happy. Thank you for joining us today, and please, you may go ahead. The stage is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much, John.
You may, yeah.
Is it okay? It's okay? Yeah. I'm Mazarin Mintsa. Good morning, everyone. I'm the Director of Safety, Security, Quality, Environment at Aéroport du Cameroon. Today, I'm going to present you the benefits for airports installing a solar PV plant. And we'll take also Douala Airport as a showcase. Therefore, my presentation has only two sections. The first section, some quick facts about Douala International Airport, and the second sections about how the project was implemented and its benefit at Douala International Airport. So you can see here an aerial view of our runway. It was rehabilitated in 2016. Nice one. Douala Airport is Cameroon main airport. It's operated by Aéroport du Cameroon. Aéroport du Cameroon operates 7 airports. Douala is the main one. And at those airports, it's the sole ground handler. You can have here some traffic data of 2019, about 1 million pax, transit passenger included. A lot of African airports are the same. Here you can have a typical day active power consumption profile. We need this one to design the solar PV plant of our airport. And as you can see, we have an average demand of 800,000. But at daytime, the minimum is 800,000. You can see a hole here in the middle. It's due to the fact that there were power cuts. So now, just go quickly at the benefits. You can see here in a view of the solar PV plant. This was the picture taken when it was under construction. So the project itself, it was a project entirely funded by ICAO and EU, European Union, for about 1.4 million USD. It was accepted in February 2019. The project had 3,840 PV modules, 20 inverters, 2 educational kiosks for real-time readings for the solar PV plant to airport users. We had, unfortunately, no battery storage system, because I must say that, I must explain that that project was the same as initially as Mombasa, but we changed a little bit of the specification. Because of our profile, we thought that it was better to have a solar PV plant with more photovoltaic panels than having a small one with batteries. Yeah. But it has some drawbacks. We are aware of that, because when there is the system, what it does is that it's synced with the parameters of the grid, but we'll go into details a little bit further. Now, just go quickly into benefits. One of the first benefits of installing a solar PV plant at an airport is to have a lower carbon impact. As you can see here on the picture, we have been able, within this month, to save about 1,000 of CO2 emissions. That is equivalent approximately of planting 10,000 trees. We have a small algorithm that calculates the amount of. Here in the picture, you can see a picture of the inverters and the transformer here. Another benefit is a stable connection at the gate. At the gate, we use a solar energy to provide ground power via an electric GPU to the aircraft at the gate. And then therefore the aircraft are able to shut off the fuel power of APU when they are connecting at the gate. So in addition to the savings in CO2 by the construction of the solar PV plant, we also have an additional one from civil aviation. It reduces also a greenhouse gas. But now, if you have a battery storage system, normally, you should have been able to have a stable energy, because as I was explaining, normally with a battery storage system, the system is able to provide a stable energy to aircraft at the gate. We know in Africa that there is a lot of power cuts for the national grid operator. But unfortunately, in our system, what our system does, it syncs with the national grid operator, as I said. It takes the parameters of the voltage and the intensity. And then power cuts, what the inverters do is that they and then they go directly in the protect mode. So they do not inject power into the system anymore. But with a battery system, storage system, what it does basically is that it simulates the parameters of the national grid. And then now the voltage, they are able to again, because our generator system is connected in a low voltage connection and not in a medium voltage connection. That's why it's not possible to have that stable energy. But we do hope that in a near-term future, we will be able to install a battery storage system just to handle those drawbacks. Again, third benefit is reduction in costs. Yeah, since the commissioning in February 2019, we have been able to generate around 100 and 500 megawatts and save around 200,000 USD. This is not non-negligible. And then we hope that within the 9 to 10 years, the total cost of the project is going to be covered, even including the maintenance. If you look at the histogram that is just below, you will see that since the commissioning, this is how we have been able to save from by using the solar. So you see in February, in January, we are consuming more than 2018, and then since the commission in 2019, then the consumption went below and below and below again. So this is, I think, this is really what we have saved. What we have saved. The managers were if it will work, but they have been able to see that it's working well, and we have been able to save a lot of cost in power. Again, one benefit that is also important is that the construction of the solar PV plant can help you to generate extra revenue. How? There are two ways of doing this. The first way of generating extra revenue is to lease land. This really makes sense with for airport with low traffic. This is a lot of African airports have low traffic. Airport with a lot of underused land. This is the case of African airports that were built around 1970s and 1980s. They were built when there were a lot of traffic, but after the crisis, then some of those airports were with no traffic or little traffic. So it makes sense with those airports. And also at places where there is a good irradiance. So for this airport that have low traffic, a lot of land, and good irradiance, it does really make sense to lease the land, because it generates non-aeronautical revenue. So it's a way of having money. It's for those airports that does not handle enough traffic, it's a good source of money. The second thing is that it protects for the land for spoliation by a surrounding population. You know that in Africa, where there is a poor law enforcement, population often, when they see that there is underutilized land, they will come first to the airport for farming, and then they will start building houses. So in Africa, using the solar PV plant is also a good way of protecting the unused land. The third point of leasing the land is also because it may help the community. How? Because if you lease the land to a solar company to build and operate the solar PV plant, as we are doing actually in Garoua, at the north of Cameroon, it can help to meet the requirement of a huge demand in electricity for schools, for settlement of factories. Actually, this is what we've done which we are actually doing at Garoua Airport. We've signed an agreement with a solar company for the construction and operation of solar PV plant. In Garoua, at the north of Cameroon, there is a huge demand of huge deficit in electricity, and we hope that that project will help the community to have a stable, clean energy. So this is the first benefit. The first way of generating extra revenue is to lease the land. Does make sense. The second way of generating extra revenue is feeding back the grid. This one is not yet implemented in Douala, I must say, but we can say that if you produce more than what is required, the surplus can go on the battery storage system, and then if the battery are charged, unfortunately we don't have them, the surplus can be used to be injected to the national grid, but provided you have an agreement with the national grid operator. Unfortunately, in a lot of African countries, the national grid operator is not comfortable with mixing its energy with solar energy. I think we've heard from Peter, who was explaining that was the case in Mombasa Airport. I think a lot of countries in Africa still have the same problem. The national grid operator is not yet comfortable with mixing its with thermal energy with the solar energy, because he doesn't have the resource, he doesn't know how it works, so they take it with caution. But sometimes, even if he's willing to accept, he doesn't want to pay. So for Gawa Airport, for example, because with the solar company, what we have said is that we will secure a 500 kilowatt peak with a battery storage system. What we do basically is that since the airport will not consume all the energy, maybe the surplus could be injected in the national grid, but still we are discussing with the national grid operator. We managed to get him accept to connect our solar PV plant to the grid. That was not really easy. Now what we are trying to do now is to make him accepting to pay, if possible, the surplus that we would inject in the national grid.
Yes, Mazarin, so, this is one of the questions that is being repeatedly asked. So maybe we
So
keep this for the Q&A session.
Yeah. So it's really, we are still under discussion. It's not easy, but I think we'll see how we can make it with. We're still under discussion. We have been discussing now for 1 year, but now we are still discussing. So this is really, as I said, one of the last benefit of having a solar PV plant. So the first one is to have a low carbon impact. We are saving CO2 emission. That is really good. To have stable energy, that is also good, provided you have a battery storage system. But even if you don't have, you still have a lower carbon impact by using electric GPU aggregates. That is really good. Obviously, and we see that we are saving a lot of power cost, and within 9 to 10 and even 7 in some projects we have 7 to 8 years you can have your costs recovered. And the last is that you can generate extra revenue, help your community with a solar PV plant. So I'm going to leave you with the picture of a monitoring system of our solar PV plant at Douala Airport, and I will thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mazarin. It sounds like you shared about your experience of a happy end user of a solar project. And yes, since the project was commissioned in February 2019, it's almost like a year and a half now of data and operation from your side. So you definitely have a good view on what is a happy end user. Some of your presentation at the end was talking about money and financial aspects. And that is, of course, always a very important topic. Many people want to go solar, airports and non-airports, but very often the challenging point is how to finance this project. And for discussing this topic today, we're very lucky to have Terje Osmundsen with us. Terje is a very experienced solar professional in Africa. He's worked with some of the biggest and leading companies developing large-scale projects in the past. And Terje is now the CEO of Empower New Energy, which is a company specialized in financing CNI projects, CNI for commercial and industrial. And Terje will now explain us a little bit about what are the options to finance such a project and benefit from the advantages of solar energy from the get-go. Terje, the stage is yours. You have to unmute yourself. You're currently on mute.
Good afternoon, everybody, or morning, depending on where you are going from. I will now would like to introduce my topic by sharing a presentation, which will be very, let me see, can you see this now?
Yes.
Yes. So, as I said, my purpose would be at the end of this interesting session to address some of the questions you could have regarding the financial various incentives and opportunities. And just in order to do that, I just need to give you a brief introduction of where I come from now. I am now head and founder and the CEO of an impact investment fund, which is focusing on equity funding of high impact projects in Africa. Our investors are Nord Fund, Electrify, which is the European Union, and a number of private investors. We have done already our first investment in Ghana, and we are working with the projects also, which are very similar to what the kind of project we have discussed. Typically very often behind the meter projects. What I would like to refer to is, as an introduction, is an article that I published in AFSIA Africa a few days ago, where I have tried to map also the cost of electricity and what are the benefits of going solar for various CNI clients, which I assume airports mainly will also be part of that category. And the conclusion that I came to from this study is that business users in sub-Saharan Africa, and that also then goes for airports, pay in average, even if we keep the diesel cost aside, but just paying for the grid cost, they are actually paying 25 to 50% more than the world average price for business users. This means that also for an airport who needs to be competitive, having competitive electricity at daytime is an important factor to be able to offer good terms for hosting and increasing their activity. So it should also be looked at in that view, and also, of course, from a impact perspective and what you can actually gain in terms of CO2 savings and so on. So if I come to then the main message of my intervention is that one of the things that we found out in this study, and of course it's not a surprise, is that in some countries in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, partly Ghana, it is you are allowed to get the license or a permit to finance this your arrangement. We are a power purchase or a power sales agreement. So if you are an airport, then what this means, of course, is that you can sign up with a developer, an investor who can then you can then negotiate the tariff with this provider, and then it will be the developer investor to actually mobilize the capital and construct and operate and then transfer at the end. That is allowed. That is a normal business model across the world for industrial CNI. In Africa, it is still not yet legalized. So this should be one part of the agenda also going forward, is that more countries should follow in the roads of Kenya, Nigeria, and partly Ghana to actually open up for power sales agreement to be established. The advantage from the airport, of course, is that if you look at it from a balance sheet perspective, a power sales agreement means that you can consider your payment for the kilowatt hours as an OPEX only, and there are no effect on the balance sheet. And of course, you can have completely peace of mind because all the risks, technical and commercial, and all the technical and kind of operational risks are on the solar provider. You only pay for the kilowatt hours that is actually delivered. And of course, you can also, as has been shown here, you can also then make sure that the solar provider include the backup or emergency power as an element in your solution. So you will also have a so-called islanding function, so that even if there's a blackout in your country, your solar provider will then be responsible for keeping the electricity on. So that is the typically power sales agreement. And after the contract period, it could normally be a transfer back to the airport, or it could be a renegotiation depending on the preference on the guy. If you are still look for a third-party financing because this is a too big investment for you as an airport, then you could of course enter some kind of lease-to-own agreement. That is also perfectly straightforward, and that is legalized across. I mean, that you can do across practically all the African countries today. So this option is there for everybody, whereas the power sales agreement is still limited to certain countries. I guess the main difference, of course, is that with the lease-to-own contract, you pay a fixed amount. You can, of course, have a performance service level agreement, and performance requirements in the lease agreement, but you will still have to pay whatever, not independent on the. I mean, you pay the fixed amount, whereas for the power sales agreement, you only pay for what is actually delivered. And it also will be a liability in your balance sheet, so it could have an effect on your corporate lending costs. So those are both, and just to make sure, we in Empower, which is an impact investment fund working with develop, we finance projects on both these different structures, so they are both options for an airport. I'd also like to add that the kind of project we're talking about also has an important sustainable impact, and we as an impact investor, we will not only kind of prioritize, we will actually also review, monitor, and report the performance about how many various keys, especially those 3 sustainable goals, which is increasing electrification, job creation, and number of tons of carbon per year. And we think this is also going to be an important competitive perspective going forward, also when it comes to requirements in aviation. So maybe I should add, if I would like, just to have one opening up the perspective. We're talking about now solar at airports, but actually there is a lot also activity now taking place in the greening of aviation more in general. And one of the perspective which is now becoming more realistic is, of course, that you will have hydrogen or hydrogen derived fuels being part of the energy mix for aviations in the future. What this means, of course, is that airports in Africa that has access to competitive solar energy, you can very well think about, not next year, but maybe in a 10, 15, 20 year perspective, that you will have airports who start with the solar power for their own electricity needs, but maybe in the future you will have electrolyzers producing hydrogen, which will then fuel the flights for the future. So this is just a reminder that the road that we are entering now has no limits until we have been able to bring zero emission aviation to the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terje. Thank you very much. I'm realistic. I'm aware that we are a little bit over time, and I thank everybody for staying with us. It's a very dense topic today. We had a lot of information to share with you. So hopefully you can stay a few more minutes. We have some last remarks. Terje, if you can make me the host again, please, that would be appreciated. We have some last, thank you. We have some last remarks from Steve about how to go if you want to start your solar journey as an airport operator. And then very quickly we will take some questions. Many of you have submitted questions. Thank you very much. We will try to address some of them. But first, Steve, please go ahead and tell us a little bit more about how to start a solar journey as an airport.
Sure, thanks, John. Just a few slides just to wrap up. Really want to get some Q&A going, so I won't take too long. I think the key thing about trying to get a project going is to be able to succinctly describe the benefits, which you've heard some of that from our other panelists, as well as some of the realistic challenges, but also to be able to communicate very clearly that solar and airports are very compatible. And I think one of the issues that does come up very early on is the question of glare. And it's important to be able to communicate that that's a very manageable issue. So you can control glare through siting and design, and that the modeling tools that are available can avoid that issue. So if you're able to kind of initially communicate that and say that solar and airports has been demonstrated, and this graphic that you see on the slide is somewhat old. It's from 2015. So we have a lot more dots on the map, including in Africa, that are not included in this graphic. The point is that there are lots of examples already of successful solar and airport projects that you can point to. And the key point is that, that it's a very safe and hazard-free type of project. Now, here we go. And then defining the type of project, this gets back to both where on the airport it makes sense to site a project. So it's going to be different for different airports. But if you have a lot of land, you know, you might want to look at that land. If you have a lot of infrastructure and parking, you want to look at those areas. So figure out a project concept that fits with the type of airport that you have. And then based on that, also investigating, as Terje talked about, who your partners might be, coordinating with the utility, kind of collecting some of that information to better define what the project should be for your airport. And then once you kind of define what your project will be and who the partners are, then you can kind of figure out, again, coordinating with partners, whether or not the airport is going to own the project, or if you're going to work out a lease arrangement, are you going to buy the power, or is a third party going to be selling the power somewhere else, maybe to the utility? So these are all components of the project which is going to be very specific to the airport and to the country. And experts like folks on this webinar can help you very quickly figure out some of the initial answers to those questions. Once you understand that, then you can pitch your project to you know, your airport, to your partners, to government officials. And John, I'm going to pass it back over to you to wrap up.
Thank you so much, Steve. And great to see that actually the process is relatively simple. Let's say the steps are known. Several experts like yourself have worked on this and can accompany airports that would like to go through the process. I believe you will also be releasing a more complete report in the coming weeks on this topic, so definitely worth following you on different social media to have access to this report. Many questions. Thank you for everybody who has submitted a question. And I would like to actually go straight to it. I have questions for every speaker, dedicated questions. Mazarin, I would like to start with you. Several listeners have submitted questions about cleaning the panels and how complex this is, and also if you have experienced an issue with burned fuel, which might have landed on the panels and maybe caused some complexity on cleaning and on the operation of your panels. Could you please tell us a little bit more about that topic of panel clean in a few words?
Okay, thank you very much, John. For the cleaning of panels, our experience is we are lucky in Douala Airport. It is raining a lot, so it helps because the rain cleans the panel automatically. However, we do have a program for panels cleaning, and we have not faced a lot of difficulties doing that, because where the solar facility is constructed is a clean place, so we don't have a lot of dust coming, and there's a road close to it. So there is and it's inside the airport in a secure restricted area, so we don't have a lot of problem with the cleaning. The rains helps, and also we clean. We have water. We have tanks that comes with water, and then in a bi-monthly basis we clean the panels. So we don't have a lot of difficulties. We don't have even things coming into the. We have not yet experienced anything coming into the panels and facing difficulty to clean the panels. So at our level, everything is still okay on the cleaning of the solar facility. This is what I would say. The second question was about what? I forgot.
It was about burn fuel. Maybe.
So even the burn fuel, we don't have such problem in the cleaning of our panels at our airport. From what I know, we have recently done a review with the contractor who is doing the maintenance now. But for the panels, there's no issue in the cleaning of panels. That is what I would say. It may be different in another airport, but in our airport from now, there is no issues concerning the cleaning.
Great to hear. It's always the topic of cleaning is always a question that comes back quite regularly, and it's a fair question, but it's very good to hear that in your case it is not causing any particular trouble, and it's been taken well care of. Very good, thank you. Peter, some of our listeners, and you already mentioned a little bit about this during your presentation, but ask questions about how do you actually install a solar project at an airport that is in operation. I mean, this is a relatively difficult environment with literally moving planes. I mean, there must be some elements of security and HSE that you need to take into account. And then also another very specific question: what about vibration from heavy cargo planes? And how does this impact the structure of your installation, whether it's ground mount or roof mounted? Was there anything specific that you had to take into account while building your project?
Okay, thank you, John. The first question, how do you install at a live airport? That's a good question. How do you install on any live facility? We've installed multiple projects around live shopping malls, live factories. An airport is no different. We need to treat the airport operators, the public, as number one priority in terms of safety. We need to ensure we don't affect any operations. To do this, the best method is proper planning. You have to go in, be prepared, look at all the operations that you may be coming into contact with. Yeah, just proper planning, really. We of course, at Mombasa Airport, were set away from the actual airport. We were near the entrance of the airport. So the biggest interaction for us was cars passing the site, and ensuring that operatives walking between or moving between the installation facility and the airport to continue with the interconnection, for example, were safe and were not interfering with the traffic. So it depends on the airport, depends on where exactly you're going to be installing. But yeah, the main thing is you have to look at all these obstacles, all the challenges, and plan accordingly. A lot of liaison with the airport management team probably will help in that regard. I think that's it for the first question. Second question, you were asking about the impact of the vibrations of large cargo aircraft.
Yes.
Again, Mombasa Airport, we were set away from the airport. I think the closest, the shortest distance from the site, the installation site and the runway was probably in the region of 300 to 500 meters as the crow flies. And to be honest, I did not experience or notice any undue vibration from aircraft, any more than a large lorry driving past on the road would have provided. So I don't believe we took any additional measures or put any additional measures in place to help with that. But obviously, if the installation site is very close to the runway, that could be a factor. And I would suggest that the engineering team designing that should be made aware of this possibility, and then this should be posed towards the mounting structure provider. I presume that would be the best approach.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm totally conscious about time. I look at the clock and I see that we have completely exceeded our time, but there's still many people listening with us. Thank you. I have one more question for Terje first, and then I'll have another question for Steve. Terje, our listeners apparently are getting a lot of ideas now that you've told them a bit more about financing options. And they are wondering in general, how ready is the market ready for PPAs at airports in Africa? And then a secondary question, is a bank guarantee always required for such a project?
Yes, no. With Empower Equity Fund, we do not require a bank guarantee for the project. We will look at the viability of the project. We will look at first of all, of course, that this makes sense in terms of both savings for the client, for the partners, for the community, and then also that it meets the fund's requirements. So as long as you are in a situation where there is a healthy off-taker who is committed to make an agreement on 15, 20 years, this should normally be financeable. Not a specific bank guarantee would not be required. When your question is whether how ready the market is for PPA. Yes, the market is ready, if absolutely, to finance these kind of projects. The problem, I think, in some countries is that the law is not yet ready for PPAs. In that case, we would recommend some kind of lease to own type of structures. But I think more over time, we will probably see more and more countries adopting also PPA legislation, which will enable for this. So I would say that the finance, the opportunities are there, and we would be happy to take a look at any opportunities and see what kind of financing would be most relevant from our perspective.
Great to hear about this. Thank you. And Steve, final question for you. We would have many questions about what is a typical load profile. What is the average consumption at an airport? Mazarin briefly mentioned the situation at his airport. But briefly speaking, well, every airport is different. Based on the size, the electricity consumption will be different. But in the end, the question that comes back is it possible for an airport to rely exclusively on solar energy?
Yeah, I think you are correct. There's going to be different load profiles for different airports. And I think an important factor that Mazarin touched on was that airports are connected to the grid. So particularly in Africa, one of the issues is where the grid power goes down. When that happens, the airport loses power and has to generate backup from typically diesel units, and the solar facility goes down. So there are some tricky aspects to designing the right size project for an airport, but certainly looking at the load profile is the first part of it, and then matching the solar electricity output to the load profile is a component. And then I think Mazarin also touched on whether or not the utility is going to buy the excess power, and so that the utilities policies related to so-called net metering is very critical as well to figuring out the economics. So these are all very complex issues to trying to figure out the proper size. Just to close out on whether or not an airport can rely entirely on solar power for its consumption. Certainly it can, and there are examples of airports I know in the US that get all of their power from solar. I'm also familiar with some projects in the press from India that have also established that they receive all of their power from solar. I think the couple of the critical questions are related to the net metering question, because really the airport is doing calculations about how much power it consumes and how much is generated by solar, and some of that's being exported during the day to the grid, and then they're buying from the grid at night when there is no solar. So they're making calculations to demonstrate that on average they're consuming all of their power from the amount produced by solar, but it's not always being generated by the solar. So it's definitely achievable, but it has to do more with the mechanics and some of the net metering policies, which can be complicated and very country specific. So that's the short, simple answer.
Thank you very much. And yes, I would like to thank the four of you. In a normal conference setting, I would invite the crowd to give you a big round of applause. Now in the current circumstances, you have to imagine the crowds in all craziness. Thanking you for your genuine contribution today. Thank you also to our media partners, Africa 21 and ATA Insights, for promoting this event today. And of course, thank you to everybody who joined us today to listen in and learn a little bit more about solar for African airports. I'm really sorry that we were not able to answer all the questions you have submitted, but we will do our best to follow up. If you have submitted those questions with your name, I will either transfer those questions to the right speaker or answer directly. And please, please, please be in touch for this topic, but also for anything solar in Africa. We're here to assist you. We're here to help you build more projects and have more people in Africa benefit from the great advantages of solar energy. Thank you once again, everybody, Mazarin, Terje, Peter, Steven, thank you so much. And I hope we will be in touch very, very soon. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.